Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Tracy.
And my name is Melissa, and we are so glad you are joining us for today's episode. Our guest today is Joanna Meade, an international baccalaureate technology and math teacher originally from Trinidad. After attending university and teaching in the U.S., Joanna's itching for change took her abroad to teach in Japan and China. She especially wanted to immerse herself in the local Chinese culture and language when she moved to Wuhan. She hit the ground running, but realized she did not have Google Maps to guide her. But no worries, Joanna's tech savviness and willingness to ask for help helped her navigate so much more than a city map. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part one of Joanna's round trip story gets ready for takeoff.
We are here with Joanna Meade, a very special person to me and my family because we got to meet her in China. And Joanna, thank you so much for staying up late to meet with us while we wipe the sleep out of our eyes this morning here in California.
No problem at all.
So as we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family or where you grew up.
Okay, so I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago, which is a small island in the West Indies. And I'm the older sister. I have two, it's two of us and my mom and my dad. Dad died in 2005. And my mom and my sister still live in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad, because there's two islands. So we live in Trinidad, which is the main island. And my sister, she's married and has two kids. So I have two nieces. I grew up in Trinidad and moved to United States when I was 21, just before I turned 21. When I first moved to America, I moved with my dad and lived in New York, but then it was too cold. So when it was time, I was applying for universities, I applied for North Carolina. And so I moved down there, university, and that's where I spent the bulk of my time. I did, a study abroad for my junior year. And that's kind of when I got that different experience, because even though I moved from Trinidad to the US, it still felt like, like you're still on the same side of the world. Mm-hmm. So the customs and everything was still similar. Word choices were different. But other than that, everything was still the same. But when I went to France, I was like totally different culture. They do totally different things. It really made me stop and think, the world is, bigger than I thought it was.
So how long were you there?
Just 6 months. 6 months. But because I was minoring in French. Like my father's family is originally from Montserrat, and their dominant language is French. But when my grandmother moved to Trinidad, she refused to teach them it because she wanted them to assimilate in the culture properly. So that was just one part of my heritage that I didn't get. So I wanted to learn French. Mm-hmm. And so I studied French. And then one way to finish it up was you could take a study abroad in France. And so I just joined like a university there just for 6 months. It's a very big eye-opener,
So give us a quick overview of the timeline of where you moved after that. And then I know we're eventually going to talk about your time in China. So tell us when you ended up there.
I started teaching in 2008, but I just wasn't feeling fulfilled, you could say. So somewhere around January 2012, eventually I was like, try abroad. Let's go abroad. So I don't know. I just went on to, I believe it was teachaway.com or something. I don't even remember which, Teach Abroad, but I just went on there and I saw there's this school called NICS, and because it's a network of international Christian schools, and they had like schools all around the world. So I was like, oh, I guess I could just apply. So I applied to go Venezuela because it's right next to home. And then Kenya, and I believe Brazil or something. And they called me like the week after and said, your profile fits one of our schools in Japan. Would you want to be interviewed with someone in Japan? I was like, sure. And I remember the lady was like, are you sure? I guess maybe
Do
I
you
said
need
it
to think
too
about
quickly.
this?
And she's like, you will move to Japan? I was like, sure. So I had the interview with the principal and accepted the job. I had already moved to America, I guess, by myself. So my mom said when she thought about it, she was just thinking, okay, another new place. God will know what he's doing, right? so I moved to Japan. And so I lived in Japan for 2 years, met a family called the Perrys, Amy and Justin, and their 2 kids. And so he moved to China in Wuhan and was like, they needed somebody with your position, Joanna, because I was taking my master's at the time and had just finished it. And it was in technology integration. And so he's like, we need a tech specialist here. Do you want to come? So I'm like, well, it's okay. Let me come visit. But when I came, I remember falling in love with Wuhan. Well, the whole Chinese culture, because in Japan, I didn't feel really acknowledged. Like they're curious about me because I was probably like one of 3 Black people in the whole city.
Wow.
But they were curious about me, but not enough to ask anything or say anything. So when I went to visit China, as soon as I got there, people were like, hi, and trying to talk to me.
Okay.
And so I'm like, I think you already sold me on China. I think I want to move to China, right? Now, they could be a little excessive because they kept wanting to touch my hair or, I've had people try to touch my skin to see if it was real. Not sure. But, it's like, but it's usually the older people.
Sure.
I guess, they haven't seen much Black people in China, except on TV. Obama was president, so they knew that. So they'll just see me like, Obama.
Oh,
and I was like,
my
right.
goodness.
So,
Yeah.
oh
dear.
And so visited there and decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to move. So when my contract was up in Japan, I moved over to China in Wuhan and I stayed there for 4 years. After that, I think I was fine, but I started feeling like I was losing my Trinidadianness, you could say. So I went back home in 2018 and I stayed there for 2 years. But then I decided to come back to China and I've been here since 2020. I started off in Beijing and now I'm in Shenzhen.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the stories. So tell us about your initial transition and adjustment to China.
Moving to Japan, I felt like I lived in a little bubble because I didn't really interact with people, but China was totally different. First of all, I don't know any Chinese at all, right? And it's nothing similar to English at all. And the characters and stuff you're reading. But by the time I got there, Google Translate had just come out with the picture translation part. So you could snap a picture of something and get the translation. So this is kind of how I function most of the time. It was hard to figure out where to get things because normal places, if I wanted wood, I would go to Lowe's, right? Or if I wanted furniture, you have your IKEAs and your Lowe's. But when you get there, it's like, where do you go if I want a nail, And that took me a while to figure out little simple things like that. I had to depend on school or Manuel and be like, I need this. Where would I go? So fortunately, there's this online shopping app called Taobao.
Which is like Amazon, but on steroids?
Because at least I can shop there. It comes to the school or to my door, and I figure that out. And so trying to find where you needed to go, especially getting in a taxi. And so if you're in a taxi and you want to go somewhere, you could probably show them the address. But you eventually started finding out that not all the taxi drivers can read. So you may show it to them and they don't understand where you want to go. So you had to go through this weird I'll probably have to be brave, walk up to someone and say, this is where I want to go. Let them say it out loud. So then I could go try to repeat it to the taxi driver, So that was one difficult thing trying to get around. Google is blocked So I used to depend on Google Maps, but you couldn't do that when you got to China because all of Google and Facebook and Instagram, everything is blocked. And so eventually I had to get an Apple phone because at least Apple Maps would work. So there I am with an iPhone now, so I can get around in my own language and get to things. So Sally, who was my Chinese teacher, fortunately, the company gave us a Chinese teacher, right? So that was like the number one plus of working for that company. They assigned us to a teacher, and we used to meet with a teacher one-on-one twice or three times a week. I never missed it because I'm like, this time I want to actually learn how to talk to the people, because that was the one thing in Japan that I couldn't really do. So I was determined this time. I'm going to take, because I took classes in Japan, but it was like random topics. But this time, because I have a one-on-one person, I was like, I'm going to tell you what I want to learn. Let me know. So how do I go to the grocery store and ask this question? It was like, what does this mean when I see this sign? So I started taking pictures everywhere I went. And then when I meet with her, it's like, explain this. And then it's like, I want to learn how to take the bus. Come with me.
That's amazing.
So we would have like Saturday excursions and go, right? Because I want to learn the language. I want to know how to get something.
Sure.
Do not pay my electric bill for me. Let me figure out how to do this thing. So I pretty much try to get involved with everything because I said I want to live here, not just work here, but live here.
All right. So, Joanna, tell us a story about something that was hard.
Okay. So, like I said, trying to navigate or trying to figure things out on your own was kind of difficult because I was away from family and away from my culture. And so you kind of had to slip in with the way that things were done. I think there was a phrase that was, this is China, so like, don't expect to find things the same way. I remember one of the most difficult things was just navigating the grocery store because they would put things where I wouldn't think it would be, like you're looking for tissue and I found it amongst stationery, it's like, so you're going in these stores and you're like, I don't know what I'm expecting here. And then, in China, like I said, they were a lot more friendlier, like say they were in Japan. But it just meant that people were just walking up to me and trying to talk to me. I was like, I don't know what you're saying. So even when I said ting budong, which means, I was told it meant I can't understand you, right? So I would say ting budong. But then eventually, as I'm learning Chinese, I realized, no, that just means I can't really hear what you're saying because they never stopped. So every time I said ting budong, they'd say, oh, ting budong, and then just kept talking. And I'm like, why is this happening? Right? It's like, so eventually, because in Japan, it was easy to say, wakarimasen, which means I don't understand what you're saying, and they'll just end the conversation there. But you'd say ting budong.
Because
like,
you said it in Chinese, so.
And then you just keep talking, So
maybe I just need to be louder.
Right. And that's what they did. They were talking either louder or they were enunciating differently. I'm like, I really don't understand what you're saying, So it took me a while for me to realize that that's not what I should be saying. I should be saying, my Chinese is not good. Like, instead of saying, I can't hear you, right? And so, but it did motivate me to learn Chinese more, right? So I was a little bit more motivated. Also, there was the whole trying to get things delivered, like, like if I needed something from abroad, things were restricted, right? And so like certain medication I might need, I can't find in China, but if I try to bring it in, they want, it's like borders, because you could only get up to 1,000 RMB. And then what I had was like 1,005. And so they they were like, either you get a broker to get it in or we throw it away. So there was this whole crazy, how do I get what I really need, especially when you're sick? How do I get like the certain comfort things, right? So fortunately, there was Thailand not too far away. So I used to go to Thailand every Christmas and try to find things there because, I went to Bangkok, and I felt like they spoke enough English for me to figure things out. Um, so I couldn't get shoes in my size, and I wear size 9. Couldn't get shoes because everyone here is tiny. Clothes is hard to find. So there was always had to go home every year or go somewhere else to try to get clothes. Even if you bought it on Taobao, it was like a hit or miss. Sometimes it fits, sometimes it doesn't. So that was some of the difficult things I had to deal with to try to get my hair, like say permed or whatever. I went to a salon once, and it took like 5 people standing around me, all touching my hair. Like, what should we do? How do we do this?
It's like this.
So, yeah, and I'm like, if you don't know, you could just tell me, I could leave. So I remember going to Thailand and saying, just cut it off, just cut it down, And so when it grew back out, I just had to learn to do my own hair.
Yeah.
And so eventually I went dreadlocks, because I had dreadlocks when I was in North Carolina. So it's like, okay, back to that, because these people don't know what to do with my hair here.
Okay, now tell us a story about something that you loved.
Well, what I loved was the friendliness of the people. Like, I didn't feel prejudiced against, because I know that was a question that people always ask, like, how do you feel as a Black person being in China? And I was like, I know I stand out, right? Because if I stood at the bus stop for too long, people will eventually come up to me and talk to me, right? And it was kind of intimidating, because it would be like random people, but they would either want to practice their English. It's not necessarily offensive or anything, right? And so they were a lot more friendlier, and they were willing to acknowledge my existence. So I had liked that. I didn't feel like invisible. And that kind of motivated me to learn Chinese even more. So that was one of the things that I really felt touch my heart while I was there. It was the ability to merge with the locals, right? And have them welcome us as well. Because one of the things so Sally was my tutor, assigned to me at the school, worked for the school, assigned to me. When she got married, she asked me to be her bridesmaid.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
So I got to see firsthand the Chinese way of having weddings. It was quite interesting. So we had to be at her place at like 3:00 in the morning, right? So, because it's like a whole day affair, right? And get dressed and everything. And then the husband is supposed to come pick her up. And we had to barricade the door, and he had to pretty much like pay us in order to get in, right? I was surprised, because normally for weddings, you would think that you're giving gifts. I kept receiving things for her entire wedding. Like, her parents gave me money. The groom gave me money. Then when I got at the wedding, somebody else gave me money. So by the time we were done, I got I think close to 500 RMB for this wedding, right?
So in US dollars, what is that?
That would have been like $100 US.
You got paid to be in that wedding.
Yes. Well, yeah, because apparently the tradition is, like you bless everybody. It's a happy affair, so everybody's giving everybody everything, So we were there. We had to barricade the door for him to get in. He had to pay us, right? And we had to decide if we will accept his payment. Like, we made him do push-ups at one point too. And so it's like him and all the groomsmen.
I love that. That's so fun.
Yeah. So got to see it. They had a tea ceremony at the house, like after we let him get to her. He and she had to do a tea ceremony for the parents, where he thanked the parents for raising her. And all of this. Aww. They did the tea ceremony. And then, most interesting part was, she had to be taken from her house to his house without touching the floor.
Wow.
Right? So he had to lift her to the car. When they get out from the car, lift her from the car to the house. And this was a distance now, because it's a gated community and you couldn't drive up, right? So they got her from the gate, and he had to walk her all the way. Now, she's a tiny little somebody, but it was like a good 3-minute walk. he eventually had to be passing her to his family members, his male family members. So like the uncle will take a turn, and then the father would take a turn, and all that. And then when he gets to the door, he took her back and he walked her into the house. I was like, that was something interesting, you know? And then when they got there, they did a tea ceremony. They did a tea ceremony there for, welcome. His parents was welcoming her to to their family, and now you're a part of the family and stuff like that. So it was interesting to be a part of it. I felt like, yeah, that was great. So eventually, when she had a son, I claimed him as my godson. So
Oh, that's sweet.
So I have a 7-year-old godson right now.
Tell us a story about something that surprised you.
Well, what surprised me was their culture and the way they did things. Like, so over in the West, like, I feel like we survive on credit cards and loans and stuff like that. And this was not something that the Chinese people did. Now, they would take loans or they will use a credit card, but it's not a common thing. They would save. So they really believe in spend low, save high. So an interesting thing was when I first moved there was a girl named Mandy that worked at the school, but eventually she left.
And Mandy was Chinese, right?
Yes, Mandy was Chinese. And so Mandy came back to visit me one time. And when she came with a little backpack wearing a pretty white dress. And I was like, wow, because when I travel, I'm taking like a whole suitcase, right? Even if it's a weekend. She only came for one night, but still I would have a carry-on suitcase. She came with a little backpack, and then when she came, she took off her dress and she just aired it out, hang it up, and then she put on her nightgown and she washed her underwear, whatever. Next morning, just put back on the same dress and went on. I was like, huh. Now, where I'm from, that's not something that we would ever do. Like, you don't get caught in the same outfit twice, within a week. So when they were helping me pack, so when I was moving back home to Trinidad and they were helping me pack, I remember my friends were like, why do you have so much things? I'm like, what do you mean? So then it made me aware that we probably put too much value in clothes, because I had a different color shoe for every color outfit I had, I mean, I live in China, everything is made here, so everything is cheap, right? So I had like so many of multiple of one thing, like my phone cases. I had like about 21 at one point, because you walk in the store and it's for $1. So I'm like, why not? I walked in the store, I saw one for $1, and I was like, oh, this one's blue. Okay. The next day I go and I see one that's pink. I was like, oh yeah, I'll get the pink one. So before I know it, I had one for every mood, right? I had Hello Kitty versions and I had Mickey Mouse ones. And so I had about like 21 cases. So when I was giving away the phone to someone, they're like, why do you have so many cases? So that was the one thing that surprised me. Like, even like the whole culture of like the family structure, like almost every holiday that they have, it's always a family focus to it. So even if it's like, say, Chinese New Year, they will have like one day set out for all the family to meet, which is how they get to pass down their legacy and their customs and stuff like that, right? And I lived across the street from a middle school, from an elementary school, and you would see the grandparents bringing in the kids every day, not the parents. And I felt like that stood out, like, grandparents, interesting, So they will always have the grandparents be the one taking care of the kid while the parents work. And so seeing that, especially with my godson, how when she had the baby, the mom, the husband's mom moved in with them to help take care of the baby.
Wow.
And then even when he started school, she would be the one to take him to school. Like, she'll come down for the week, take him to school, she'll go about her business, come back, pick him up, and then take him home so that the mom and the dad could work. I was like, wonder why we don't do that on our side.
So for our last question for this first segment, tell us something that you learned about yourself or the world as a result of living abroad.
Well, living abroad, because most of it I've been doing by myself. So I kind of learned to rely on myself a little bit and try things out on my own. I'm a little bit braver, I could say. Also, because I get to meet so many different people from different places, I tend to be a little bit more open-minded now. Like, you can't just assume that when they say something, this is what they mean. And so I feel like that I have grown in that way, where I don't just take things for just what was said, because their interpretation of what they mean might be different. So I ask more clarifying questions, you can say. So, because even we're always speaking English.
Yeah.
It's like, when I say something, I might mean this, or it might be a joke where you come from, but it's not from where I am, right? And so I kind of learned that there's so many different English, because there's the Singaporean English, you have the Australian English, you have the American English, and then, West Indian English. And so it caused me to be a little bit more open-minded. Also, it made me think more about why I do what I do, or why my family does things. Because especially when I'm thinking of, like I mentioned, with the family giving stuff when the person gets married, or the grandparents are the ones retiring and doing stuff. We don't have that in our culture, and it makes me, question that. So I will admit, it kind of makes me a little bit judgmental of my own culture. But at least, there's some things about it that I like, especially with my sister and her daughters, I try to encourage her to do. And it just that whole open-mindedness, and the world is bigger than we might think, like, it's not just your own little world.
Thank you, Joanna, for sharing your round-trip stories from China. Your resourcefulness with information technology and people helped you quickly learn practical language, find groups to work and socialize with, and get the products you needed to make a new home. You appreciated the locals' curiosity about you as a Black woman, and you valued their culture and learning from them, especially being part of a coworker's wedding and, a couple years later, a godmother. You really did live in China. So what happened when Joanna returned to Trinidad? You'll have to make a return trip to our podcast for part 2 of Joanna's round-trip story.
Want the podcast equivalent of early boarding and first-class seating? Be sure to subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed this podcast, would you consider sharing it with your fellow globetrotting friends? We would love to encourage them too.
As this episode lands, we hope these stories have encouraged you, helped you find some more of your belongings, and made your baggage a little lighter. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.